The next Solution Talk, collaboration with blockchain private sector leaders in achieving SDGs. Please welcome your host, Katie Gallus.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome back here for our beautiful Solutions Talk during the one and only Hamburg Sustainability Conference. It's a big honor to have you, ladies and gentlemen, here in the room, but also, of course, thank you so much for being here. When we talk about our topic on collaboration with blockchain private sector leaders in achieving the SDGs, especially, of course, a topic of the times when public institutions are moving at analog time in a digital world. So we need to tackle on that. It's great to seeing you all. How do emerging technologies, innovative partnerships, and new collaborations models help us to accelerate the sustainable development goals? And how do they strengthen not just the tools, but also the systems? Because we also need to talk about systems. So let's dive in, and also let's ask us, how can the public and the private sector here can align their expertise? Not that everybody is working in silos, but combining the silos and combining and aligning the resources. And for that, I welcome Frederik Gregaard with us, the CEO of Cardano Foundation. Cardano is an open platform that seeks to provide economic identity to the billions who lack it by providing decentralized applications to manage identity, value, and governance, but also he brings the perspective on how blockchain ecosystems can support sustainable development through practical implementation. And he worked through collaborations with UNDP, including the SDG Blockchain Accelerator. The Cardano Foundation has supported innovators, the UNDP country offices, governments, and ecosystem partners. There's a lot to talk about, Frederik, so it's lovely to have you with us. Thank you so much. Frederik Gregaard. We have Candace Kelly with us, Chief Legal and Policy Officer at Stellar Development Foundation. And Candace brings the perspective from an organization that focuses on leveraging blockchain technology to improve digital payments and financial inclusion. And also through collaboration with UNDP, the Stellar Development Foundation has been exploring how blockchain-enabled payment infrastructure. So we are thrilled to have you with us. Thank you so much, Candace.
Thank you.
Great to have you. And last but absolutely not least, we have Ivana Živković with us, joining us from the UNDP United Nations Development Program. And you're currently serving as Assistant Secretary General, Assistant Administrator, Director for the Regional Bureau for Europe and Commonwealth of Independent States. And you can give us an insights on the big question, how to work together and how innovation can help address the complex development challenges and how to contribute to a more inclusive alignment when it comes to the sustainable development outcomes. Thank you so much for being here. I know you have a tough day, so thanks for making time in the calendar.
Thank you. Thank you for having us, and it's a pleasure to be here. Also joining this important panel with our long-term partners. Digital transformation has become one of the most important enablers of sustainable development, and as the governments are navigating this rapid change, they're also facing the growing pressures to deliver services that are more inclusive and resilient, as well as responsive to their citizens' needs. Our role is to help countries navigate this transformation, putting people at the center, which means helping governments understand emerging technologies, assess where they can add value, and build capabilities to adopt them. Also to ensure they're governed and implemented ethically, inclusively, and aligned with national priorities. And here, innovation is not about introducing new technologies, but it's about finding a better way to solve development challenges. And sometimes it will involve AI, sometimes it will involve blockchain, digital public infrastructure, or perhaps new financing models. The important question here is not which technology is the newest, but which one is best suited for the challenge that we have at hand. And then additionally, technologies should strengthen and not replace existing public systems. We work with governments to identify where emerging technologies can complement existing institutions, digital public infrastructure, and service delivery systems to make them fit for purpose. UNDP plays a unique convening role because due to our presence, we work in 170 countries. We have physical presence in 130 countries, and we enjoy a lot of trust because of our long presence and previous work with the governments. We can also be the convener to bring the governments, the private sector, academia, civil society, all different stakeholders as well as technology ecosystems to translate this innovation into practical solutions. And finally, success is not measured in how many technologies are piloted or whether there are the newest technologies at hand, but rather how do they improve people's daily lives and how do they strengthen institutions as well as accelerate sustainable development.
When we talk about blockchain, maybe you can give us a glimpse. Where do you see the biggest lever and the biggest potential when it comes to leveraging it, all these solutions through blockchain?
We see it manifold. One is through financial inclusion and digital finance, then through digital identity and data governance, climate and nature finance, governance and public sector transparency, and social protection and humanitarian delivery. So we see that it is quite widespread. We have UNDP SDG Blockchain Accelerator that works across all these areas and helping the partner countries face or deal with challenges and define the cases which can then test the practical solutions.
Candace, emerging technologies, blockchains, and everything, all the tools that are now in the clouds, of course, the buzzwords that we were mentioning, everything comes together because governments are, of course, on the hunt and on the search for good solutions that are actually tangible, that are getting spread out on a local level. From your perspective, and zooming in again on the topic of blockchain making the greatest difference, Candace, where do you see the biggest difference? And of course, Frederik, in a second for you as well.
Sure. And I might take just a moment because I'm not sure if everyone's very familiar with how our foundations in the blockchain are set up. So just very quickly,
absolutely, thank you.
The Stellar Development Foundation, we're a non-stock nonprofit foundation based in the United States, but we support the Stellar network, which is different from the Cardano network, but we're working to make them more interoperable. And it was really designed the foundation's mission is creating equitable access to the global financial system. And so the thought process behind building this particular network was make it really easy to issue assets. So we're not talking about cryptocurrencies, we're talking about assets that are backed by real, like stable coins, like backed by dollars, or a real estate token that has actual real estate behind it. So making it really easy to do that, so there can be all these assets moving freely, and cross-border payments, because it should be as easy to send a payment across a border as it is to send an email across a border. Was the vision, and I think it's coming true. So I think particularly in this context, and with respect to the work that we've been doing with UNDP and a lot of the companies and projects and developers who are building on the network. So we support those people. We don't implement ourselves. So we're kind of serve a similar convener role. But payments and distribution of funds, I think it's faster, it's cheaper, it's more secure. But I think one of the really important things to note is that we have never thought about blockchain payments as being independent of the existing financial system. That's part of our mission, right? Creating access to the global financial system. So how can blockchain enhance and ameliorate the current system? How can we reach further where people don't have that access, but not to supplant or just completely disrupt it? There may be times when using the blockchain rails are a lot of the value chain transfer, and sometimes it will be just a piece of it. So that's where we think blockchain is particularly valuable.
I'm coming back, of course, to the potential of the solutions in a second. But Frederik, from the Cardano Foundation's perspective, tell us a little bit more what keeps you going on the way, of course, to spread the network and to foster the network of blockchain into the world? And secondly, where do you see the biggest lever when it comes to the tool of blockchain for sustainable development?
Yeah, what keeps me really going is that if I have a good day on the job, I can save communities, I can give people economic chances they wouldn't have without that, right? So touching people's hearts, minds, and souls out in the world. And as an infrastructure banker, I'm an infrastructure banker of trade. I find this a privilege and a luxury that I can change so late in my career and really help people around the world. And the Cardano Foundation really stands for something called Blockchain for Good. And that is to ensure that we don't weaponize these new emerging technologies, but we also don't want to control them. So what we're trying to do with this is we're trying to show the pathway for changing social systems for the betterment of human race. So it's a pretty large statement, but I have 110 very dedicated people. And compared to the Stellar Foundation, we actually do implement as well.
Tell us.
Maybe a couple of examples, right? So we work with UNDP around the Blockchain Accelerator, which was actually seeded and a lot of money in kind as well from the blockchain, from the Cardano Foundation. One of the projects called Plastics was a little bit comical about plastics because it is really about plastic recycling, right? So it fits extremely well into the SDGs, right? But where they have the most success at the moment from an economic perspective is actually in Europe. It shouldn't be like that, right? We should be completely all over, recycling of plastic. But that works really, really well in Europe. For instance, with Danone and with somebody was speaking about soccer before, right? So FC Barcelona, probably that's not the right or the wrong team, right? They're using it as well. But it also works in refugee camps in Kenya and Tanzania, for instance, right? Where they become a part of an incentive structure where they can actually, get a purpose in terms of collecting this plastic, which they then get an economic benefit out of. And then out of that comes small pearls, right? Which is then being recycled back into the production chain. And some of them are even used for local artists to do T-shirts of it and so on, right? And that means that sometimes it can be really hard to have a purpose when you are between countries or in flux, right? So I think we have a lot of really good examples like that where this really comes together. And what's always the case, and the way we think about it, is that blockchain is not the purpose. Blockchain is a boring back office system who allows people to collaborate and to trust each other. And for many years, people thought, it has to be blockchain, blockchain, blockchain. But that's not it. It's about the business context. And that's why we're so proud to work with UNDP and UNHCR and others, because they have the business context or the problem statements, or they understand how to help and how to deploy. What we understand is how to make things better, faster, cheaper, and how to ensure that you can collaborate across multiple entities and people and tribes who doesn't trust each other.
I'd love to hear another example from you, Candace. Maybe you can also share as a tangible, concrete example to get out of the buzzwords, to really understand a little bit more what brings the drive forward and the change forward. Can you share as an example?
Absolutely. And I just want to clarify, it sounds like the Cardano Foundation is doing the implementation. The Stellar Development Foundation, we support other organizations that are building on the blockchain. And so we're kind of that convening power. We have grant making and we help them with the technology solutions to make sure that they're integrated. And I think one of the sort of founding principles of how we work is that we believe that local solutions should be built by local communities. And that's why UNDP is such an amazing partner for us, because they have people on the ground in the country offices who are able to bring that, to understand what the local challenges are. And so I think there are a number of different examples, but I think I'll just tell kind of a generic one, because when it comes to payments and cross-border payments, many of the solutions on the Stellar network are very similar. And
we have, I think, pictures as well, right? To the technical team or to someone I got informed.
Would be much nicer to have pictures than have to look at.
Otherwise, we follow your words.
Okay. So with the Stellar blockchain, you're in a stable coin. So as I mentioned, the asset that has $1 back or a euro back in the bank, you can send in a matter of seconds. You can send a payment across a border, and the person will receive it in their digital wallet. And then those digital wallets. So obviously, people always ask, you do need digital connectivity. We also there are some partners that are building in the Stellar ecosystem who have solved for when there isn't any internet service, and so that there are cards that kind of hold on to that until there is internet service again. But being able to send that money, so for like in Haiti, for example, there are lots of challenges with payments and cross-border payments, but being able to send money to someone and then they can use that dollar-backed token and they can either cash out. One of the really big developments in this accessibility journey that we've had in the Stellar ecosystem was that MoneyGram integrated with Stellar, the network, about a little over 5 years ago. So that means that wherever MoneyGram is, which is about as many countries as UNDP is in, you can take those digital dollars and you can go to MoneyGram and they will cash you out in your local currency. So, or if you're in a banked someplace where there is, people don't have the unbanked population, they can also do an ACH wire transfer. But also when you're talking about people who are fleeing and refugees who are in motion, it's a very safe way to have your phone and to have those digital dollars. And if you cross a border, you're not carrying cash, so you don't have the risks of whether it's a bandit or a border patrol, depending on what country and what border you're trying to cross, but being able to arrive in the next country and not also have to be able to change from your local currency into this new currency, because you can do that exchange at a MoneyGram location. And that's just one kind of example. There are a lot of local, whether it's the mobile money markets, or the local payment networks, and so there are more and more that are integrating with the Stellar network to increase that reach of being able to use the cross-border payment with that stable token, and then locally figure out what is the easiest and best way, particularly for unbanked communities.
Thank you for both of your examples, because also you mentioned fragile contexts, fragile ecosystems where it becomes very difficult also to implement it and then to find these tangible solutions. So Ivana, maybe you can give us a glimpse, because the promise sounds quite strong, right? That you have something in your hands that is actually tangible and strong. But what does it then take to implement something like this in a rough environment, in reality, where really the ecosystem is quite harsh and fragmented, where you really have to be on guard as well?
Well, rarely the issue is access to technology. From our experience, governments do have access to technology, but there are other factors that need to come into place for things to work. One for sure is institutional leadership. Secondly, it is capacity that needs to be built, both across the governments, but also across institutions. And governance and policy frameworks need to be in place, of course, and interoperability of the already existing systems, as was mentioned with a concrete example, how to transfer blockchain into the currency. And finally, partnerships. And I think this is why this is good that you bring us all to the same table. The multi-stakeholder engagement of governments, development institutions, private sector, blockchain entities, and others that also have the technical knowledge, but also implementation experience. So we need to bring all of these to the table to have a success in our work and bringing pilots to scale.
But for that, you need, as you mentioned, institutional leadership, which is the top priority, because without the leadership, you cannot manage to implement it, or how to bring then the institutional leaders together if they are on different sides.
Yes, so this innovation needs to be driven by public priorities rather than technology. And this was the first element I mentioned. So we need to bring all of these into the same picture, and I am also grateful to our partners for taking on this work together with us and supporting us, because There was a bit of skepticism in the beginning, but I think we're slowly developing our story and showing success in many parts of the world. So we hope that it will be scalable.
Frederik, does it give you mixed feelings to hear about
Yeah.
the leadership priority?
Yeah, I think it does, right? I think in general we have a leadership problem globally, right, across private sector and public sector. I don't think necessarily we are measuring and selecting the right leaders across the space, right? So we've been so lucky in the Cardano Foundation to be able to work with people who have access to institutional leaders, such as UNDP, World Food Program, and so on, where we can go top down, and that's enormous privilege. And thank you very much. But we also have situations where we can go bottom up and really scale and scale fast. So we have, for instance, a project in India led by a set of private people who basically put a coalition in place and said, there is this caste system in India. I'm not an expert, so a big disclaimer. But if you are the oldest kid, you get the farm. If you're the youngest, you go to church. And the one in the middle is sort of in flux. And they have a basic education. They're born on the farm, so they understand agriculture and farming. But as soon as things get rough, like what we have right now, where there's a drought and so on, the state will have to go in and give them money, or some kind of organization like people here in this room will have to go in and subsidize, right? So what we've done is we brought people together. When I say we, it's really coming from private individuals who are not even based there, who basically went in passionate and said, okay, we have access to low orbit satellite data. With low orbit satellite data, we can see the fields, but not only can we see the fields this year, we can see the flybys the last 5, 7, 8 years. Now, this company don't necessarily want to share this for free. On the other hand, we have a company like Syngenta, who was bought by China and had a bit of a brand optimization issue, because if you're a Swiss company dealing in pesticides and other things for growth of agriculture, right? Sometimes there is some branding effects out of that specifically, right? And they had a foundation who was saying, yeah, we would like to do something more where we can use the imaging and the image engines we have. On the other side, we had a set of people who's like, oh, we have access to education, including e-banking and also at scale. And then but none of these were trusting each other. And then we have these thousands of farmers in India, right? And there the blockchain became the trust layer. So they get a digital identity on Cardano. Now, these farmers, at the moment, this digital identity is actually being kept. So the recovery phrase is being kept by an institutional entity, right? But they get that. They get education. They can choose 7 different areas of expertise. They get access to the low orbit satellites. So they can go out into their uncle's farm because they know exactly, they've been born there, right? So yeah, this is the corner of the uncle's farm. And that little area is a little bit more gray than the rest on the picture, which means it's a fungus and not
a crop or
whatever, right? So it can give you 15% increase if you use this kind of pesticide for that, right? So it gives them a better outcome, but suddenly this person is now specialized and has access to tools which was not granted or given in this area, right? And by that they get an income, right? And then suddenly they can marry differently, right? And they can buy property, and suddenly they get out of this system and start contributing locally in the community. And it's taking us a year or something to get to where we are right now. But now we have 20,000 farmers live in this system, and we are onboarding 700 at the moment. And now the government came to us and said, you know what? This is great. We don't have to subsidize, right? How do we become a part of this, right? And this is all coming from grassroots movements, from people who basically said, here is a problem. How do we come together in a small group? How do we speak to people? How do we collaborate around this? So I do think that what we see at least around blockchain is that if people focus on blockchain, it will fail. If people focus and is passionate about solving a specific problem and they can understand and collaborate, they will succeed. If people have access to institutional leaders, it will also succeed, but both have different incentives. So we have to deal with it slightly different, also in terms of funding, also in terms of procurement.
But what do we then learn about collaboration in that regard from your example, for successful collaboration when we use this example and then scaling it up and down? What did you learn when it comes to a successful collaboration? Because it comes from the people, and then of course it grew, but this is not always the case. So when we talk about collaboration, the big word, what would be a golden rule?
So if you do grassroots upside, right? So first thing you understand is the pilots doesn't matter anything. Never do a pilot, right? Because if you're some people who's trying to solve a real problem, and then you're like, okay, if we solve half of it and we show it to people, we might get some funding. It never really works out, right? Scope for going live, and then if you only get half of the way, you learned a lot. But you should never scope just for the pilot. And the other part is that people really matters, right? Local understanding, local community, it really, really matters. We cannot sit in Silicon Valley and solve for something in Greenland, or we cannot sit in Switzerland as I do and solve for something in India. It doesn't work. You really have to teach people and give them the access to this type of education for free, and it has to be high quality, and they have to be able to certify towards that in order for them to become the implementation partners, as my colleague was saying. This is super important. So this is the two learnings.
Candace, I'd like to dive into the topic of collaboration with you as well, because you mentioned, Taidi, you mentioned crises where often rapid action is needed and required, and we need that immediate response. And now I learn, of course, that we need to understand better the local context. So what do technology providers often misunderstand about these real-world operational, institutional, political challenges that governments also face when they evaluate, when they only look at the numbers? What would be your recommendation for the big word of collaboration? That's what we're also here for.
Yes, well, and it absolutely, I think the successful solutions always are collaborative efforts, and there's never, I think there are technologists who fall in love with their technology and think, well, this is faster, cheaper, it's more secure, it's pretty, it's cool. Well, that is useless if you don't have trust and if you don't have that local context, as I mentioned. So I completely agree with Fred that the blockchain should be this invisible layer, right? That should be not what is part of the solution. If you think about other things, probably many of you used Google Maps to navigate your way here.
But it needs time to build up trust in that technology as well. Google Maps needed time to have the trust, and blockchain is maybe not there yet. So,
and that I think is what's important about who and how that technology is introduced. And so one of the things that we think is very important, if you think of this payments, sometimes many people who are receiving these payments have never used digital money even, much less blockchain technology. So the user interface has to be really important. It has to be very intuitive and has to not have like a lot of bells and whistles that the technologists might say, oh, but you could add this, or you could add this. Simplifying and co-creating what that looks like with people who are the ones who truly understand what the problem is that you're trying to solve. So again, we're not experts. We've learned a lot, but we rely on the experts on the ground to be able to co-create and co-design what those solutions look like, and to rely and leverage that trust. You mentioned that earlier at a lunch, like UNDP and the country offices and the implementing organizations that they work with and the governments that you have long-standing trust with. If we walked in and said, oh, Haiti, you should use this technology. We came from San Francisco. I don't think we would have much success. But it's really making sure that you're building that trust and understanding and the education. So making it seamless and easy.
Yeah, Frederik, what made you to jump out of your chair almost when we talked about trust? I read your body language.
I think people are underestimating something really important what's happening in the last 14 months, right? So I gave a big speech in Paris. There must have been 800-900 people in the room. And somebody sent me a picture afterwards, a high-definition picture from the back of the room, right? And when you zoom in on that high-definition picture, what you see is that a lot of the people are sitting and using ChatGPT and Gemini and Grok and Claude to basically verify what I'm saying if it's the truth, right? And that's really interesting, right? Because all of those large language models I just mentioned actually don't know what the truth is because they're trained on internet data. It's not trained on verified data. So what's actually happening now is there's a trust shift happening, but it's not in the public eyes right now. It's in the institutional eyes. So what the real people, when I say real people, the subject matter experts in financial market infrastructure and banking and data science and so on are realizing is that the more we use AI the more important verified and attested data is, and the more important by that Stellar and Cardano becomes. So what's actually happening where on the let's say on the journalist side, they're all like, oh, the crypto markets and can we trust Bitcoin and so on. But when you walk down into the data layer, what they're all saying is we cannot do this without blockchain. And this is a complete shift, which is going to take some time to actually emerge. But I think this is truly important. An example here from Germany. We have 500 public companies in Germany using agentic AI secured by Cardano. They would not be able to use this type of technology under the European regulation and the German regulation in terms of privacy if they did not have the safeguards which Cardano is providing there. This is companies like Lufthansa, to give you an example, BMW, right? Now they can do that on a very specific use case, which is this is my own private data. I have an internal back office does the inquiry. But when we start about sharing data between different legal entities and having two different AI agents who lies in two different environments and they are requesting data, sensitive private data among each other to give a better user experience or to feed an API for something, right? This doesn't work under the current regulation, right? But it works because we can secure it by blockchain, right? We can put some anchors and defense mechanisms in around the AI, even though we don't run the AI. So we don't run the AI code at all, right? But we're using stable coins in a different way to ensure that asymmetric compute power doesn't, hit and circumvent some of the defense mechanisms which a company which is in the, let's say, booking.com, which is not an AI specialist, right? They don't know exactly how to defend against all attacks, right? But by having some of these mechanisms the blockchain offers, including identity, becomes a completely different trust factor. And what we're right now seeing is that due to the emergence and this really big epiphany moment that everybody seems to be trusting AI more than they trust the education or trust, public institutions, we see this counter of attested and verified data, which you can only get actually on blockchains, or you can get on the world's largest institutions, right, who is publicly giving that away. But we just established 10 minutes earlier that we have a leadership problem and we have a trust problem in those institutions, right? So I think there's a really big trust shift happening right now in the engine room, powered by AI, to the benefit of blockchain. And the blockchain is ready to handle it. Not all blockchains, but we are.
Exclamation mark. I hear that at the end of your sentence. No, wonderful. Thank you for pointing it out. And it shows again that these solutions, of course, they have different layers when it comes to identity, to security, which brings me back to the word of collaboration. Ivana, I'd like to come back to you because when we talk about partnership, it's also about exchanging and being in exchange with different partners, right? And of course, there are different opinions, different ideas, different security layers, different layers within that tool. So how on earth do you bring all these layers together besides, of course, the different layers on the ground that are already multidimensional, multilateral, with so many different colors as well? So bring us a little bit into the work of UNDP when it comes to tangible collaboration and the partnerships that are now on the rise.
Well, no development issue can be handled by one actor alone. So, of course, our primary partners are governments with which we agree on multi-year plans. What are we going to do in their respective countries? But, of course, bringing in the multiple stakeholders, as I have already mentioned, from the private sector, academia, civil society, even the grassroots level, as it was mentioned, that we, for example, work with small communities across Central Asia, which they have kind of a self-governance and tackle their own problems. For us, this is also a very valuable development lecture or development example, how things can be handled at all different levels. And I think one maybe element that makes UNDP a bit different than other development agencies also at scale is our presence in the communities. So we're not only in the capitals, but we really go into the regions. And on the blockchain specifically, we understand that we need to be the convening partner when it comes to use of blockchain in development. And for that reason, last month, we established UNDP Blockchain Advisory Group with about 30 different ecosystem leaders. And we also have plans to take this initiative forward and listen. One important element is to partner and to listen, and then to see how we can translate this to benefit our work.
So you meet on a regular basis and you keep yourself updated and...
We just set it up last month.
All right, so the next meeting is just around the corner. Great, thank you so much in that regard. Okay, I would say we are on the last mile here, and we need some oxygen later on as well. Or is it just me? No. Let's get ready for some questions. Fire it up. Not all at once, ladies and gentlemen. Maybe we start with you, Eve. Eve Bangemann, I spoke to her earlier. She's for the climate change and sustainability lead at Ernst & Young, Eve. And we haven't talked about, one topic about finance is still something that we need to debate on, resources. How do we actually manage to find resources? Maybe you have an answer to that, Eve.
Yeah, I don't know whether I have an answer because you are the experts, but I thought, blockchain, I heard it many years ago already, and it took some time, to see real examples. And I was asking myself whether it's, the reason for that I didn't see so many examples, that there are not enough ideas, but I see there are many ideas and many examples, so that's not the issue. But maybe it's more about financing. And so I asked myself, how can this make better in the future, and what finance models could be the right ones? And maybe you find it helpful, but I thought maybe this partnership between public institutions and you could be a solution, and also involving private partners to get the financing done. And another idea could also be outcome-based financing, so along the way looking what's the impact, and if the impact is incentivized for the investor, that this could be another idea. And maybe also on-chain financing, treasury could also be a good idea, from my perspective. And when it comes to resources, this is the one that's maybe the most challenging one, find the right resources that work on those projects to get them done, and also to accelerate. And I think that's crucial. Would also be interested in your view, how you get this done in future. Thank you.
Thank you, wonderful. So we take the question of resources and finance. Candace, maybe you can start, and then Ivana, of course, with the budget cuts all over the world, and especially in international organizations, so we need to talk about budget cuts as well. Maybe you start, and then Ivana, and Frederik, of course, please add.
Yes, well, you covered a lot of ground, and we actually work with EY. You have a new lead for your blockchain, who we've worked with very closely in his prior job, and will continue to. But in terms of financing, I think that this is a time that calls for really creative financing. We are a grant-making organization, and so we can do a part of that. But being able to catalyze more, and also to think about more innovative financing, because there are a lot of opportunities for yield. One of the things that I've learned as I've gotten more familiar with some of the UN agencies is that things take a lot of time to get, there may be funds, there may be fewer than there used to be, but there may be funds, but they sit idle for a period of time before they're ready to be deployed. And with blockchain, there are so many opportunities to actually be earning yield on that. So one of the things that we have been spending a lot of time thinking about is up until now, with like the accelerator and with other projects we've had with UNHCR and World Food Program, we've been focused on getting the funds delivered by blockchain, but really, whenever there is a transfer from fiat to digital currency, there's friction. And so the more that we can actually help these organizations to transfer their internal treasury and their internal record keeping to blockchain, one, there are fewer frictions in terms of deploying the funds when they need to be deployed. And secondly, instantaneously, even for short periods of time, those funds can be used, can be deployed And there's a wide variety of risk profiles in those opportunities. But a money market fund, for example, that you can earn yield on, and you can pull it out immediately, but you're earning yield 24/7 on it. So I think there are a lot of different ways that people can be creative. But one of the most important things is that the ERP systems and the delivery systems internally are also transferred over. So there's not all that siloing.
Frederik, when we talk about money, resources, funding, what would be helpful to get more of the tools on the ground?
So it's always one of those questions on camera where I'm a little bit like, how should I answer, right? In general, I think the blockchain industry and this magic free internet money has been a disfavor to the industry. There's simply been too much free money going around in blockchains, and that meant they had too much freedom to give grants and select, cool use cases, which she said just before, like, we like it, it's academic, it's a cool problem to solve, right? But it didn't really do anything, right? But where we are right now is that blockchain is not just ready to be implemented, it is being implemented, it's changing the way finance is operating, but also social systems. But we are also doing things significantly different. And I really like what she said around the KPIs and escrow funding mechanisms, right? As an example, the Cardano Foundation, we have small holding structures. We have a German company, an Irish company, and so on. We actually publish all of our financial transactions, including our salary, on the blockchain. So we publish 72,000 transactions on the blockchain. And what our auditor is doing, instead of doing a spot check, because that's what auditors have always been doing, because there's so much data, where do I go, right? They go into the company and they ask for printouts, and it's a long process. It's very costly on both sides, and there's frustration, right? What they actually do is they download all of our ERP system on the blockchain at home with the auditor. They run machine learning on it. They come in. They were there for 6 hours. They had 4 questions in the end, which we just needed to disclose, right? And then after the board meeting, they went out with a little USB stick. They posted it into a computer, and then they signed using the way we do in banking, which is called the legal entity identifier. And said, I am Grant Thornton of Zurich. I've not only ratified a spot check, I ratified the whole architecture of the Cardano Foundation, the holding structure, and therefore the balance sheet and the P&L statement is correctly done. And when you think about that, what we just did is we took, the cost of transparency from very high for many NGOs and foundations, close to zero, right? Because getting an LEI number, if you don't already have it, is about $200 a year, right? It's a little bit of a process to actually get it, but that's about it. Huh? Now we are interoperable with all ERP systems, right? It's an open protocol, and this beautiful world of AI, right, makes it extremely easy to do that kind of mapping, right? Because we all implement accounting standards differently, right? And with these smart contracts, which we can do on many blockchains, right, it allows you to do specific milestone funding, right? So you can work with oracles and you can work with accounting KPIs. There's really no limit anymore, right? It can be 2 newspapers who report that grains was deployed on the blockchain, and therefore you get the next level of the grant. And normally with a bank, that costs a fortune. It is unpayable to do escrow accounts with lawyers and bankers in the middle. And the reason why it's unpayable, because it's really expensive for them as well, right? But now you can do it, it costs 17 cents on the dollar on Cardano to do that.
Wow, you can all do the math then. Yeah. Absolutely.
So I think really what's happening right now is that in a strange way, some of us who's been in blockchain for a very long time, we need to forget the past. And we really need to focus on talking to business experts, to problem solvers, solution architects, and then we need to choose our battles, right? We need to say, hey, we cannot help everybody, but when somebody with a track record or somebody with the heart at the right place comes and says, this is a huge problem, it can be done on blockchain. Now the question is it better, faster, cheaper, and will really move something? But what we see right now, it nearly always is, and that's really a new moment, a new epiphany moment.
Coming back, Ivana, to the question of budget and finance, of course, how do you tackle that? And then we have one intervention, another question from the floor, so the microphone is getting ready. And oh my gosh, the clock is ticking. We get just Ivana, please, quickly, and then I come to you.
You answered it in part, and budgets are shrinking, especially for official development assistance. And last year there was a reduction of 23%, and that has been unseen in the recent history. So what we have to do is be creative. We can always find some catalytic funding and try to bring some of these initiatives and scale them up. I'm afraid sometimes pilots will need to be implemented, because we cannot, with small funding, you cannot tackle large interventions. But the most important thing is that we have a goodwill, and not everything needs to be expressed in dollar value. Some partnerships can also yield result in different ways, not only with money investment.
Absolutely. 1 minute. I get 1 minute of my tea. Oh, beautiful. Okay. Do we have a microphone as well? Yeah. Oh, you have the microphone. No. You had a question, and okay. Fire question. No introduction. One question. Be precise. Let's go.
Yeah. The question is, who pays for the platform? Because the farmer makes $1/100 of a dollar. So who pays for the platform, and who is the buyer, who is the payer?
Okay. Fire question. Frederik, you save the question. And then
how can blockchain be used to create more trust, especially when you talk about, I saw lots of investments into Africa failing because people lost their money. And so can blockchain really help to build this trust to create transparency against corruption?
Okay. Frederik,
yes, and the ecosystem.
Okay. Yes, and the ecosystem, Candace?
Yes, yes. And
thank you.
And remember that many blockchains are open and public and free for access. Obviously, as you build more layers, there may be some costs, but open, public, and very low transaction fee, almost zero transaction fees.
It's a double-sided balance sheet, right? So to use the blockchain, you pay a little bit, right? And then it covers a bit of the cost. And the idea is that those two things should match each other, right? But most of these blockchains doesn't yet. So there is a small gap which is being funded from a decentralized treasury until we get this equilibrium. But it's the ecosystem who essentially pays for it itself. So by using, you support it, right? And that also means nobody owns it, nobody controls it, which is really powerful today. When some of the largest actors suddenly change their mind on who should have access to what model or who has access to what database, right? It's very nice to have something which is, non-controllable by any nation or state actor.
Which answers your trust question.
Thank you so much. And I hope to see you all once again for our next conversation when we talk about this hot topic of blockchain. A round of applause to Ivana, Živković, Candace, Kelly, and Frederik Gregaard. And I also say hello to Jacqueline Mazambia, because she's from the Youth Ambassador Program of the Hamburg Sustainability Conference, and she's following along all these blockchain and AI debates, and you're taking notes, and of course you're open for conversation as well. So thank you for your leadership in your community, because it's local that we need the power of. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.